receive a link to the recording when it's available for use after the webcast. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Patrick Tian. He's the CEO of Gazelle Systems, and he's the creator of the Rhythm software and author of Execute Without Drama. Patrick speaks around the world and was recently chosen to present at the YPO Global Showcase. Patrick's done a great deal of work helping companies to make the right decisions to build strong teams for their businesses today and the future. And he's excited to share what he has learned with you here today. So Patrick, it's great to be here with you today.
Hey Ryan, thanks man. It's great to be here. So I have a guest with me today. Barry, one of our coaches, is here. I just want to welcome Barry.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for helping me out today. So Barry is one of the many coaches that we have in our stable. Our coaches help companies to connect their strategy with execution. And today we're going to help you to develop the right team for both today and tomorrow. I get asked all the time to come in and help teams execute at a higher level. And often what is thought of as an execution problem may in fact be people problems. Sometimes people don't have the skills to execute the projects at hand, or maybe they don't have the leadership to inspire and focus a team correctly. So let me just kick off with a case study. And I just want to refer to this CEO as Jack in order to protect true identities, because people's stuff can be rather sensitive. And this is a true client case study. So in this case, Jack had a head of sales that was working very hard. He had a really good relationship. The problem, though, is that they were not achieving the results that they needed to achieve as far as the sales results were concerned. And they struggled. They struggled for more than a year. They worked on this because Jack thought it was an execution problem. They worked on sales process. They worked on sales process training. They worked on improving the CRM system. But sales results were still languishing. Not great, barely acceptable. Finally, Jack reluctantly replaced his head of sales. Now, the new head of sales brought in a new perspective and new skills. He assessed the sales team. He ended up replacing a couple of guys and gals, and then he validated the rest of the team. With confidence restored, this team started delivering on their sales goals. So in this case, Jack mistook this for an execution problem. That's why he worked on the process, hence the sales process training, CRM, etc. By the way, all these are good things to do, but he really, in this case, had a people skills mismatch and a people problem instead of an execution problem.
So Patrick, what I'm hearing is that in this case, the misdiagnosis of execution versus people cost a full year. And that's really expensive.
Yes, it was expensive. And I want to make sure the audience hears me correctly. I'm not asking you to automatically replace your team at the first sign of execution problems. Merely I'm saying that you need to make sure you have the right team to execute well. And sometimes you need to really look at your team before you jump to the conclusion that it's an execution problem. So today I want to share 3 tools with you to help you get your team right. Before I do that, though, I'll show you that I've seen this movie many times just with different actors and CEOs. And I thought, there's a couple of quotes from some clients that we have. First client said to me that, the wrong VP of sales cost me $500,000 to $1 million this year.
Here's the second one. The wrong operations guy gave me quality problems and an all-time high in unfilled customer orders, which led to lost sales.
And then this one, the wrong HR person told me more about what I could not do rather than help me find a legal way of getting the results that I wanted. So I'm going to go into the 3 tools for you today. The first, you should receive these tools, by the way, your registration. If not, I think Ryan has it posted that you can download. And if you have trouble, you can always download this after the webcast as well. So the first tool here is to help you to evaluate your roles for the future and fill them today.
Hey, Ram Charan shared it, or validated this actually at our Growth Summit in Las Vegas last week, that you need to have the right people in the right seats based on the skills that you need in 3 to 5 years.
Yes, and he really validated this tool that we're going to teach today, didn't he, Barry?
He did. It's gratifying to hear.
Okay, the second tool is to help you to evaluate current team members, to assess and then develop a growth path for them and build them up for the future.
Lots of people automatically feel that they need to replace their team. So what you're really saying is that we should assess and create a path of growth for our existing team members.
Yes. It is painful, man, to replace people. And unfortunately, skills are not grown overnight. So wouldn't it be better if we had a growth path to get loyal employees growing and ready to handle the future?
Well, that sounds good, but there still might be gaps, right? Roles that existing team members just cannot fill.
Right, and so that brings us to our third tool. And our third tool is to help you to develop a job scorecard and hire to fill the gaps necessary in your organization for the future.
Okay, so we've got a pretty full agenda, Patrick. First, we want to figure out the right people in the right seats for today and tomorrow. Second is we want to find a path to grow our existing people to fill the challenges of tomorrow. And third, we want to fill the critical gaps by hiring now and outside talent, or new and outside talent.
That's right. Okay, so our first tool is going to help us answer the first question that we need to ask, which is how do we know what the right roles are for today and tomorrow?
Well, Wayne Gretzky used to say, I skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck already is. In business, that just means you need a clear vision of where you want your business to be in 3 years. And then you build your organization to meet that opportunity.
That's right. So let's talk about this future puck. So when you think about the future, what are the roles that are key for your future? You want to carefully examine each role and the skills required to connect your current roles and skills to your future opportunities. It's easy to ignore this right now because if you don't feel the immediate pain of the future, it doesn't cause you to want to go solve that problem. But I don't want to wait until there's a fire to fight. I really prefer to prevent the fires versus fighting them. Okay, this is our first tool. It is our future organization roles and skills tool. And we want to help you think about your roles, the results, and then the skills needed to achieve those results. What I want you to do when you use this tool is to think with a 3-year time horizon. Think about what you need for the future, not just today. Think about where your puck is going to be. So let me demonstrate this for you. There are 3 columns here. The first column is the role itself, and I want you to not include names of current people playing these roles, because when you do that, you get biased by the skills of the current person. So instead, I want you to focus on future needs and not think about the current person that may be in that seat. The second column is for you to put down results and KPIs, key performance indicators. Now, oftentimes, people have difficulty with KPIs, and okay, that's fine. I would say first, make sure you can describe the results. If you can describe tangible results that you can observe and validate, that's a great first start. Then the third column is for the skills that you need to have in order to deliver on those results. So let me give you an example. Let's say this is a head of marketing and strategy, and this person needs to deliver on these 3 results: the right core customer, the right products to sell based on trends, and the right brand strategy and channel partners. And the skills this person needs to have would be market research and trends identification, market segmentation, customer demographics, buyer personas, business models, and have some good financial acumen. Let's do a second one, head of manufacturing. In this role, this person needs to optimize the manufacturing process. He needs to be able to deliver raw materials efficiently. So these are the results that you focused on. And the skills: lean, constraint-based planning, demand forecasting, warehouse inventory management, and a good appreciation for supply chain and purchasing.
Patrick, we as coaches love this tool because we do this with clients all the time. Recently, with one of our clients, the CEO was having people issues with his team, people issue with the people on the executive team. They were confident that they were qualified for future roles. There was just no doubt in their mind that they were well qualified for the future. Yet, they didn't have a clear understanding of their own skills and their abilities. In a recent deep dive session, our coach worked with them and they drew out and pieced together the future roles and skills that were needed for the organization. These same problem players actually pictured themselves in their new positions. Yet the CEO knew that these members did not possess the skills needed on the new org chart.
The CEO knew, right? So the CEO was pretty certain. Now, this can also be a problem. Sometimes us CEOs, we can be wrong. Not often, Barry, but sometimes we can be wrong. But, we therefore need to be open to exploring and listening. So if we use this tool, we're trying to depersonalize this highly sensitive and emotional discussion. so that it allows people who may be affected to participate in the discussions effectively and help us as well.
Well, that's right. And in this case, our coach facilitated a deep dive on-site session, used this tool, went in and asked a lot of questions, and then used the tool to help objectively figure out the roles for today and for tomorrow, and facilitated that discussion, creating what's called a safe environment for everyone to participate.
So in this case, you focused on tomorrow and used today as a starting point to get there, right?
That's right.
Cool. So let me finish up this tool and share a couple of tips here. The first tip is don't stop the flow of input. Just write it down. You know, sometimes people have difficulty differentiating results from skills or job descriptions. It's okay. Don't stop the flow of input. Just let them come and just write it down. The second tip is to keep a safe environment. Kind of along the same lines, but try to add to the discussion versus correcting people. Once the leader starts correcting people on roles, others may not feel safe to provide input. And then be open and listen without judgment. You know, we all have our own opinions. This is an opportunity for us leaders to listen for once.
You know, Patrick, it's interesting because in an effort to be positive, sometimes leaders judge as the input is coming in. Things like, that's a good one, great idea, I really like that. But what happens is then people shut down because they feel like the good ideas that are going to be chosen by their CEO or their leader is already on the table. It's better for us to just listen and capture the ideas. That is to be neutral. In fact, if you were a country, I'd call you Switzerland.
Hey, Barry, that's a good one. So we should add a fourth tip. You know, even positive judgments can shut down more ideas from flowing.
Well, thanks for judging that and making my point, Patrick.
Oh, man, Barry, I guess there'll be no fifth tip then. Okay. So, you know, Ryan, Barry and I are having a lot of fun here, but I think we should pause for some questions if you have them from the audience.
Yeah, that's great. So please use your control panel to submit questions to Patrick and Barry as they come up. I've got a couple of questions here, and as we're answering some of those, please send yours in. So Tom's asking, what if I need to hire the person's boss? You know, do I ask his feedback on this?
Yes, this is a great question. Happens a lot. So a recent client was faced with this issue recently, and let me ask you a couple of questions first, Tom. You know, first I would ask, is there a successful role for this person in the future? And the second question I'll ask would be, can he be helpful or she be helpful in determining the results and skills needed for his or her boss? Now, if your answer is yes to both questions, and I hope it is, then you can do what my client did. What my client did was he had a discussion with the person, shared with the person why he was important, and then showed him a couple of possible future roles that he might like. Once he saw that he had a future, he then wanted to help determine the results and skills to hire the best boss possible for him. So in that case, it was really good to have his feedback and determine that role.
Thanks. And Matt's asking, do you do this with a team or just with a CEO?
So Patrick, I've got some ideas on that. Matt, the idea is, or the answer is this: it depends. You need to get input from your team. That's a great thing to do as a CEO. But you want to make sure that your people know that you don't run a democracy. You want feedback, but you want to make the decision, or you will be making the decision on what that role looks like and what skills are needed.
Thanks, Barry. I got another question from David. David's asking, how do you know if it's a people problem versus an execution or a strategy problem?
So that's a really good question. You know, in general, I think that strategy problems are seen when you don't have enough revenue growth. Execution problems, you can identify them when you think that you have a lack of profit. In other words, you're working really hard, lots of revenue coming in, but you're not getting the profit you want. And then all the time, if you're running out of time working too hard. And then finally, on the people side, you know, Tony Shea at our recent Growth Summit talked about happiness. What I found is that when you have people issues, you are not happy, or your team's not happy. You might wake up dreading to go to work with so-and-so. So if you notice that, then you probably have a people problem. And I'm giving you very broad strokes here, but typically that's what I've seen.
Yeah, and then one last question here is from Juan Carlos, is how do you make someone know they did something wrong without being judgmental? And how do you make sure they realize what they did wrong?
That's a really good question. First thing I would do is I would focus on the facts. So when you, in other words, instead of telling yourself a story as to why that person did something wrong, I would focus on the facts. I would call it out. Hey, you know, this particular project, it was delayed by 2 days. And a fact is something you can observe. That's a fact, right? Versus saying, you know, I think you were not working hard enough that caused the project to be delayed by 2 days. So I would call out the facts. Hey, project delayed by 2 days. Client did not, client project did not get this thing done correctly. Those are facts. And then share your thoughts on that. Hey, I worry that we're not having enough resources on here. Then ask the person's perspective. So what are your thoughts? What do you think?
We use a lot of questions here, Patrick, like, could you give me some insight or help me understand what was going on? So however you word that, it needs to suit you, but it allows you to shut up and for them to talk.
Yeah, I think it's really key to let the other person share his or her thoughts. Otherwise, they will feel judged.
All right, thanks, guys. Well, let's move on to our next tool.
Okay, the next tool answers the second question, which is to help us figure out what our people plan is for today and tomorrow. So if you think about your future, right, who can fill these roles? That's what we should be thinking about. And you don't want to design an organization that will be obsolete the minute the team is put together by focusing on today. And I think that's why, Ram, Sharon, and us, we're so focused on saying, think about the future versus today. So let me show you the second tool. Notice that there are also 3 questions up at the top that will help you as well. And so for each role, what you want to know is who's the candidate that you have, right? Who's the person that's in the team right now? Take that person, that candidate, and compare that person to the needs of the role. What are the person's strengths? When you compare that, you should come up with what are the person's strengths, what are the skill gaps, and then what are potentially any leadership gaps.
So Patrick, from there, that's where we actually get to build a path of progress for the chosen candidate to help them grow so that they can grow into the role for the future while they're still executing and making it successful today.
That's right. That's right. By the way, let me share a personal story here. I have had the pain of this personally at my very first company. I used to hire people, and a couple of years later, they'd move on. Either I'd fire them or they'd fire me. And that was because I wasn't thinking enough about the future. I think it was my failure as a leader to not prepare them for the future, to not grow them as leaders, but to grow their skills as well. So I've felt the personal pain of this, and I really have a passion to help people not feel the same pain that I had, because it was painful. So let me demonstrate how to do this with the role of marketing from our previous example. So if you recall the previous example, I'm going to show it to you here in a slide. This is the role of the head of marketing. Right here is the results that we expect and the skills needed. So what you want to do from the first tool is take a look at the results and the skills, and then take whoever you're considering for the role, or that person may actually be in this role today, which is that's the power of this tool. If that person is in this role today, you can assess them because you're assessing them for the future. Just remember that, you're assessing them for the future. Okay, so let's do that right now. So let's take the head of marketing. And let's say your first candidate is Jane. And you take a look at Jane, you assess against what you saw just now, and you can determine what her strengths are. In this case, Jane has good market research, customer segmentation, she's creative, and she writes great. Those are her strengths. Then when you take a look at the skills gaps, here are a few skills gaps: business models, financial acumen, buyer persona, inbound digital marketing, and brand strategy. And then also she has a couple of leadership gaps. Now, in this case, by the way, this is actually a real example. I just used Jack and Jane and all that to kind of mask true identities. But in this case, this person is actually growing into a leadership role. So now she has to actually manage people, hold them accountable. And some of the leadership gaps we need to develop her with are holding people accountable and listening. That's really important if she's going to be successful.
So, when we go on site, sometimes one of the things that we discover is there's more than one candidate. So what do we do if there's 2 or 3 candidates for the position?
Yeah, so in this case, there was more than one candidate. And so the second candidate's name is John. If you take a look at John's skills, his strengths, he's got good brand strategy. He's got consumer packaged goods background. And this, by the way, is a consumer goods company. And so he also understands customer segmentation, direct marketing. He's got good digital marketing skills. So those are his strengths. His gaps, on the other hand, not very good writer and not very strong in whole market research and strengths. very sure of himself. So, because of that, also he's not as open and encouraging in receiving new ideas on the leadership side. He tends to kind of know what to do and wants people to do exactly what he has. And so once you've done this, by the way, you can now make an objective decision to see who's better, who's suited, and what's the go-forward plan. You should have some skill gaps. I'm going to talk about the future here. So if you have no skill gaps or leadership gaps, then there's really not much to help grow that person in. So don't be afraid of facing skill gaps because, skills can be taught and trained. You also, by the way, have the right to say that the role is so much larger that no one on staff is right today and I'll hire from the outside. And we will hold that discussion for our third tool here.
So I'd interject here, Patrick, that when I talked earlier about the client where the CEO had trouble with the executive team, when we went on site, we helped this team have that facilitated discussion using this tool, and it helped them clarify future roles and titles, and some of them actually had a lot of difference in opinion on what titles should be. They wanted to be CFO, wanted to be chief of something or chief of something else versus vice president. There's a lot of discussion around that. The important thing that we did was to bring them back to focus on the role, not the title. The role is what was important. And by focusing on role, we helped them determine multiple levels of management, and they gained clarity on the responsibilities of the executive team and what could be delegated to managers below the executive team.
That's great. Thank you for the case study. So let me share a few tips from this tool to kind of wrap up a little bit. The first one is a coach is helpful to facilitate thinking and actually discussion as well. I found these to be very tough discussions and also rather emotional. So here's where really, whether it's a coach or a friend or a mediator, but someone from the outside, they can really help you think through things and have the right discussions. I think it's especially hard if you are thinking about future roles of people that are close to you in the organization. You're blind to the blind spots, so to speak. It's really hard to do that without some help.
So we recommend that even if you're not one of our clients, that you find someone outside your company to help you have these tough discussions.
Yes. Okay, the second one is begin with the future in mind, and I can't overemphasize this. So,
one of the things that I found is that at the same time, we need to determine the right seats for today as well as for tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, and I've always found it to be more fruitful to discuss gaps for the future, and then put the right people into those seats today, and then help them build their skills if there's runway or if there's time. Then you want to build a path forward in private. Lots of people do this one wrong, and they discuss the path forward in front of other people. That's really hard for the person being addressed to deal with, by the way. So you want to do this. Now, even though you're focused on the future, these gaps probably need to be filled today as well. If so, point it out to the candidate in private and build a growth plan for him or her. That's the magic of focusing on the future, to help people be open to developing their skills. For example, Barry, if I came to you today and said that I had some problems with the work you're producing today, how does that feel?
Well, I immediately feel threatened and I feel defensive.
And you should, because your work is crappy. I'm just kidding.
Thanks for doing it publicly.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Okay. So instead, I would say to you, hey, Barry, you've been working really hard, and I appreciate that. And I am focusing on our future and how you might grow into a future role. Now, how does that feel?
You know what? I'm open to that because I want to see the company grow, and I want to be part of that future.
So, that's a quick example of how this private conversation could be more successful for you. The simple formula I used is first, I appreciated the person, right? So you've been working hard, I appreciate that. By the way, even if you're unhappy with a person, there's always something you can appreciate about that person, okay? And then I told Barry that I was focused on our future and how he might play a role in it. Now, I'm not promising him that he will play a role. I said might. So hopefully he can play a role and I can groom him for that, right? So that's why it felt different. So, appreciate the person, focus on the future, assure that he might play a role, and then you can carry on with your conversation. So the last tip here is to achieve progress and to make it stick. You need weekly accountability and you need monthly coaching. So you need weekly accountability to make sure they're working on themselves. I don't think I can work with someone if they're not working on themselves. So they have to own their progress, not you. And then monthly to provide coaching and to accelerate progress.
So Patrick, this might be a good time to take some more questions on this tool.
That's a good idea. So Ryan, any questions out there from the audience?
Yeah, we have some questions coming in now. And Sally's asking, do I do this in a team with all of my reports?
Do I do this in a team with all my reports? No, for the assessment, you want to do it privately with each person. In other words, for this particular tool, it's about assessing the team members, right? So you want to do that in private.
Okay. Chris is also asking, is this only for the executive team?
So Chris, the answer is that every leader in your organization should be doing this for someone that reports directly to them.
That's correct.
So Ryan, that was the answer.
Oh.
Everyone should be doing this with their team members, not just the executive team.
Got it. I'm looking for some more questions. Someone was asking to go back to the last slide for just a moment, if you would. I think
The last
they
slide.
take a note off the last slide. Yeah. And then Tim's asking, what does the weekly accountability look like? What does the weekly accountability look like?
Okay, so this is the last slide. The weekly, whoops, let me get you the weekly accountability. And so this is what weekly accountability could look like, right? I would suggest that when we build a path forward, we identify skills and we identify leadership gaps if there are, right? And so you would work with your team member and document a path forward plan. And in that path forward plan, there are going to be actions. I'm going to go take this class. I'm going to go read this book. I'm going to go get myself a coach. I'm going to go do a number of things. Be very careful that your path forward plan, your path of progress, must have actions. Actions that you're going to take. Now, those actions is what I mean by weekly accountability. So on a weekly basis, if I was working with Barry, and let's say Barry wanted to work on his session facilitation skills, I chose that, Barry, because you have such strong session facilitation skills. So let's say we're working on your facilitation skills, then on a weekly basis I'll be asking, you'd be committing to improving certain things. And so it's really just asking if that person has done what they're supposed to do and how does it feel? Is it working for them?
The one thing we like about that, Patrick, is it allows weekly adjustments as well, which is exactly what we coach within companies, where you can make the adjustments before you've gone too far down the wrong path or in the wrong direction.
That's right. And by the way, time goes really quickly. I mean, this is hard work. I mean, improving skills, improving leadership skills, it's all hard work. So you want to make sure that every week you're doing something small, and before you know it, you would have improved significantly versus waiting till you kind of have to deliver and you haven't done anything. So that's why I like the weekly accountability.
Yeah, and one last question from John really deals with more the emotional side of this. He says, what do you suggest to do with the most loyal, dedicated, hard-working person that really wants to be a leader but just might not qualify? How do you handle that?
Well, the first question I ask is, why does that person not qualify? I mean, I truly believe that most leaders can be taught how to be leaders. So sometimes I see two things. First is it could be that that person has no desire to be a leader. So if the person doesn't desire to be a leader, not much we can do to help them. But if the person has a desire, most times it can be trained. And the skill that I see lacking the most is really on the leadership side. So I would suggest that if the person's a loyal person that wants to grow, that we sit down with them, we build the same process. I believe in the process. This process has worked for me with tons and tons of customers. We've used this over and over again, and it has worked with people that of all ranks and all positions. So I would say you work with them to come up with a path that they have to own. If they don't own that path and own their own progress, it is not going to work. So if the person is very loyal and doesn't want to own their path, then I would suggest that you explain to them how they're going to have a much greater successful future if you hire their boss.
All right, well, let's move on to the final tool.
Okay, the last tool. Our third tool will help you fill gaps by creating and using job scorecards. So you kind of need these things. These are prerequisites to fill out this tool. You need a job position. You need to know what the results are. You need to know skills, and then you need your core values. And by the way, the first couple items here, job position, desired results, and skills, you can get that from our organizational roles and skills tool, the first tool that we showed you today. And then you've got to have your core values as well. So if you haven't done your core values yet, you might want to do that. So this is a one-page tool. As you see, it's all about getting the right criteria. It's all about getting the right person on the bus, and it's all about making sure you have the right seat for the person on the bus. So prepare for great interviews. You want to know what you're interviewing for. So the purpose of the job scorecard in this application is to help you have great interviews and choose the right people. You want to provide everyone on your team with the same right criteria to interview and select the right person to hire. And then you want to get that person in the right seat, So I want to show you a real example. To protect private client information, I decided to share a real example from ourselves, from our Gazelle Systems coaching job scorecard. This is the job scorecard we use to hire coaches. So if you take a look at this, what you see is the job position is a Gazelle Systems coach that reports to our head of coaching. We want to ensure that the clients are successfully implementing our Think, Plan, Do rhythms and maximizing business results with our rhythm product and tools. So the desired result in this case is we want healthy, happy clients, long-term relationships. We're really focused on client retention. And from previous webcasts and reading my book, I'm the red, yellow, green, super green guy. So we use that process, and green is the goal. So the goal here is to have 90% client retention. Unacceptable level of performance is anything below 80%. That's red. One of our clients said, Patrick, think of that as the pride level. That's right. So if your clientele on our side here has a retention rate of less than 80%, then as a coach, you're going to have to apologize to me for your lack of success. That is the pride level, minimum level of success. And then super green is a stretch goal. So that's the desired result we want. Skills and competencies, we want to have good communication skills, ability to listen well, and create trusting relationships. We want to have business proficiency. We need you to understand our methodology, but also strategic topics and various internal processes. And then we need technology competence. Most of our coaches, we do coaching on site as well as on the phone, or rather using WebEx. So our coaches need to be technically competent. They need to be able to master multiple technology systems, tools, and platforms. And then if you look at our responsibilities, caring for our clients, and then participating in our internal processes. How we keep smart, because I always say nobody wants to hire a dumb coach, is we need them to participate in our internal processes. And so we have a weekly CATQ there. CAVQ is communicate, ask, bounce, and question. It's a weekly training thing that we go through. So you're going to do those things. Those are your responsibilities. And then these are our core values that we need to do well with. And so if you look at the whole scorecard in its totality, here it is. So, Barry, we used a similar job scorecard when we interviewed you a couple of years ago.
Patrick, I don't think I'll ever forget it. I recall when I was interviewed that everybody had a job scorecard in front of them. Everybody was writing furiously on that job scorecard, and frankly, it felt like the Spanish Inquisition.
I know. It was great for us. I hope it was good for you, but it was great for us. Anyway, it was important for us to all have the same job scorecard, and then we discussed after you left. So, in this case, we did a group interview. So at Gazelle Systems, we did group interviews. We all scored you on this sheet, or should I say the older version, because it would have improved it since you've joined, as you probably know, because you've helped us interview as well.
Right, and I also know what it feels like to be on the other side.
That's great. So tell the audience how it felt to be on the other side.
Well, I'll tell you, I felt like that as a company, you guys were well prepared. You knew what you wanted, and it gave me some confidence in Gazelle Systems, because I've seen a lot of companies do poor interviews. So it really made me think that your team is high quality, and as a team, you've got your act together.
Well, Barry, thank you very much. And by the way, you're still here, so you must have your act together as well. So anyway, be sure to discuss this when it's fresh in your mind. So what we did after we interview is we debrief right after the interview. And I like, the job scorecard helps us to avoid the pitfall of falling in love with candidates. And by the way, that is one of the challenges I personally have. I have not interviewed many candidates that I don't like. And Ryan and Cindy and Barry will attest to that fact. I fall in love with candidates. And so there have been many times when I wanted to hire somebody, but a team member involved in the process was able to pull out a job scorecard and convince me based on facts gleaned from the interview using this job scorecard. You'll notice that we rate you, red, yellow, green. And then under actions to take, we may provide some feedback as to why we think that person that we're interviewing for the job had or had not demonstrated that skill or responsibility or that core value. So it's a good way to provide detailed feedback. And by the way, if you haven't gleaned this yet, I like group interviews. Some people think it's intimidating, and I like it. I happen to like it. I think we all hear the same thing. We can all debrief right after while it's fresh in our mind, and it speeds up process for you and the candidate. It's really lean. Mm-hmm. One example I'll share with you about hearing the same thing is somebody in separate interviews, I've seen people come out and say, oh, I like candidate A, he's very creative. You may argue over whether or not that person is truly creative. However, if you were in the same interview, you could say, really, why did you think that person was creative? What did he or she say? And then the person would say, okay, he or she said this, you all heard the same thing, but you may have interpreted differently. And so then you can have that discussion about how it was different. Maybe it wasn't creative, maybe it was something else. So let me wrap up this third tool with some helpful tips as well. So the first one is to do group interviews. If you guys don't do group interviews, try it. You may like it. It saves time, reduces drama. You guys all hear the same things. And then debrief with your team using the scorecard, right? Debrief immediately after the interview. Everyone should have rated the candidate. I usually share with my team, I don't care what questions you ask, as long as you can come out and rate this candidate on everything on the job scorecard. And then the third thing is, use the scorecard to evaluate performance. It's interesting, after a person starts working, you can actually use the same simple job scorecard to evaluate performance. How are they performing according to the job scorecard that you hired them with?
Patrick, I'm amazed. A lot of people don't use the job scorecard for evaluations, and I wonder why. Because the job of giving someone feedback is so much harder when you don't have a baseline for the evaluation. That is, with your existing team members already in place. So I recommend that you do it, that you get a job scorecard, and so that you can do it well, not just for hiring new candidates, but also you can be proactive and have the right conversations with your existing team members and help them grow into the future of your organization.
That's great. So Ryan, those are the helpful tips we have. Are there any questions from the audience that we can pause for?
Yeah, we have several questions. There's a pattern of questions coming in. People are intrigued by that core value you had on the example of no TDC. Lots of people want to know, what's TDC stand for?
I get that all the time. No TDC stands for no thinly disguised content. That's because open content is just fine here.
You heard that in my interview a moment ago.
Yeah. No. So all jokes aside, no TDC, no thinly disguised content. And this really came from my very first company where we hired very smart people. It was a lot of programmers. And what would happen is that as people disappointed each other, instead of clearing the air, they would start avoiding working with each other. So no TDC just means that. It just means that if someone disappointed you or gave a challenge to someone, clear the air so that we don't have thinly disguised contempt. We don't want to put contempt either, by the way. I was just kidding.
Yeah, and several are asking if you'll put the tips back up while we're taking questions. That would be helpful for several folks. If you can just go back one slide. Let's see. David's asking, do you have any perspective on how this tool would work with a 3-hour top grading interview format or versus a group interview? Any perspective on how those things can work together?
Yeah, so actually, we actually do use this tool. Did you say David asked the question? So David,
Yes.
we actually use this tool in a top grading interview. It's just that we do a group top grading interview. So yes, I think this tool works great at top grading interview. By the way, top grading actually recommends that you do a job scorecard as well, and a very similar one too.
Yeah, and Rajesh is asking, what's the maximum number of desired results each person should have?
That's a very good question. I think it should be between 1 and 3. Now, the reason why I say that, there are lots of results, but really I want to ask the question of, what are the 1 or 2 key results that if you don't perform well on, you don't have a job here? Like, I want to be able to pass the hallway test. If I walk down the halls of Gazelle Systems and I ask the coaches here, what's the number 1 thing, they'll tell you that it's customer retention, making the customer successful. I want them to know that. So if you have 4, 5, 6 other things, it's really hard to remember what is top of mind. So I like to have 1, at the most 3, but less is more. I would focus, zoom in on the most important thing to achieve.
Kevin's asking, if we have a very talented applicant or employee that doesn't follow our core values, do we need to replace them if coaching for success isn't an option?
So can you ask that question again, Ryan? This is a person that's being interviewed, or this a person that's already in the company?
Well, he says applicant/employee, so it could be either one. They don't follow the core values, so what should we do about that? Should we replace them if coaching for success isn't an option?
So when you say coaching for success is not an option, I take it that coaching for success has already been tried. If you have the right core values needs to be a handful. The asset test for core values is you need to be able to hire and fire by. So yes, I think, first of all, if that person is interviewing for a job and you haven't hired that person yet, don't make that mistake. Don't hire someone because they have good skills but don't reflect your core values well. You're just going to invite a lot of pain in the future. And then, but most importantly, yes, if the person cannot be coached to live your core values, you won't be able to scale the company. That's the main reason why. You won't be able to grow and scale your company. So I would not allow that person to remain in the company much longer.
And Alan's asking, we do individual interviews. Do we really have to do group interviews?
No, you don't have to do group interviews. I just happen to like them. So, and most of my clients that I've suggested that they try that have found the good results. Like I said earlier, the one thing I really like is that you guys all hear the same thing. And so what you hear could be interpreted differently, and by hearing the same thing, you guys can have a more accurate discussion later. So I like group interviews, but you don't have to do it.
And additionally, what we see is that if you do individual interviews, sometimes a candidate can adjust their answers based upon information that's gleaned from previous interviews. But what we like to make sure is that everyone hears the question asked the same way and everyone hears the same answer. That gives you much better insight to the candidate.
That's actually a very good point. It reminds me of someone that I hired years ago at Medisys, my first company. He had to interview with 4 members of the executive team. What was interesting was, as he interviewed with each member, he would ask them, so hey, the head of development, what is Ray like? And then when he talked to Ray would say, wow, that guy was awesome. He can do exactly what I want. And he'd say, Ray, what is Patrick like? And then when it comes to me, I'll be like, oh my God, he's awesome. So what happened was that guy played us because he asked each executive, in a way, it made it sound like he really wanted to be a team player and fulfill the job well. And in fact, what he was doing was he was just interviewing extremely well.
All right, got another question here from Sarah. Sarah's asking, do you change the job scorecard after the candidate is hired?
The job scorecard after someone is hired, actually the answer is yes, because jobs change. So the job scorecard would change as well. We recommend you consider revising it twice a year, maybe once a year, but that you need to go back on some regular basis and revise it based on where your company is.
Yeah, by the way, if you do that, then you can have a good view of your future at all times. So you would change the job scorecard because maybe there's a new skill involved or something.
Okay, I think we need to move on for the sake of time, and I think you got some wrap-up that you want to do.
Yep. So we're wrapping up, and for all of you, thank you very much for attending this webcast, and please wait for the survey to pop up. And then if you need my blog, etc., that's the information. But I'd love to get your feedback, so please wait for the survey to pop up. So today we covered 3 key tools, and you can download these tools or email Deb, and she'll email it to you if you have difficulty downloading it. The first one is our future organization roles and skills. This helps you to begin with your future in mind and build an organization that's successful for yourself today as well as tomorrow. And then when you have that, the second tool is to help think about your team. How do they build that future organization? How do you skate to where the puck is going to be versus to where the puck actually is today? So lots of times, our company grows, and if we don't grow our team correctly, you're going to fail them as leaders. And so use this to do that. And then thirdly, if you need to hire, you need to fill a gap, use a job scorecard, document that information, and hire for the future. So thank you very much for joining us today. I had a great time sharing this information with you. Please email me your feedback as well. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Hey, thank you. And this concludes our webcast for today. Thanks so much to Patrick and Barry, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Again, please help us by just taking a minute to fill out that survey when the webcast ends. And again, thank you very much. Hope you all have a very wonderful day. Thanks again.